Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
Hello out there, gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the big show, the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scott McKay, at Scott McKay on Twitter, Real Scott McKay on Instagram, Scott McKay on YouTube. The Facebook group is Mountaintop Summit. And of course, as always, you can find us at www.mountaintoppodcast.com. With me today is a friend of mine who I've probably known since the beginning of my tenure as a dating coach, way back in the pickup artist era. And this guy has been around so long, he's actually talked about in Neil Strauss's book, The Game, which hardly anybody talks about anymore. And what he's best known for, in my humble opinion, is being a man who loves women. We'll talk a little bit more about that once we get rolling. But coming from alternatively either Eastern Europe or Vancouver, Canada, is none other than Mr. Arzamarata himself, Zan Perrion. Zan, how's it going, bud?
Going fantastic.
Yeah, it's been a while since you and I chit-chatted, so I'm looking forward to this.
It's been a while.
Yeah. And the topic du jour is the obvious one, which we haven't talked about in this show nearly enough, at least not directly. I mean, I think in a cursory manner, I mention it quite often, and that's this idea of adoring women. And the first thing that comes to mind, Zan, is you are a guy who absolutely does adore women. I've heard you say in your own words that you're almost addicted to the pleasure of enjoying women in life. Some of us go play golf and ride motorcycles and play guitar and stuff, and your hobby is women. And it's amazing. I mean, of anybody who is capable and worthy and qualified to talk about adoring women, it would have to be you. So I guess my first question to kick this whole conversation off would be, Zan, why do so many guys seem to have a problem adoring the same gender of human beings we're sexually attracted to? Where do you think the root of all that is?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, maybe a better slant on it is, why do several of us just absolutely adore the concept of the feminine spirit, like the essence of the feminine? And I don't know, like, I've always been on women's side, even though there's a volume of women out there that are, not nice and not pleasant and just as hung up and insecure as all the men out there. The essence of the feminine grace that underlies it all, just like the essence of the masculine grace, is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think some of the specific things that come to mind when I talk to guys, or guys who say, I've had a bunch of women treat me poorly. I've been broken up with, I've been divorced, and she took everything. She ruined my life. All these crazy women out there, they're all psychotic. They're unreasonable. They'll blame you for things. A lot of guys are really concerned that women are going to cry rape if they try to touch them. And a lot of that, I think, Zan, is caused by a very small vocal minority of women who are very noisy about their distrust and their dislike for men, compared to the vast majority of women who are just very sweet and wonderful and want to find the right guy in their life. And it's almost like men are either reactive to that media-driven message, or they're reactive to what really, when you get right down to it, is what a small handful of women have done to them. And, you could probably even pile on the fact that, look, if everybody is rejecting you who's female, it probably isn't about the women. It's about looking in the mirror. And a lot of guys quite literally don't like facing that. Does any of that spaghetti stick to the wall for you?
Of course. I mean, like you said it clearly. I mean, like, there's a small percentage of women that have essentially screeching voices that dominate and drown out the rest. And there's a vast majority of women that want to reclaim the essence of the feminine and the beauty of relationship and the polarity. But you don't hear that. So you can imagine a young man or a man who's newly divorced, and he turns his face towards the world and society. He realizes that there's just all he hears in the airwaves, like you said, is destructive noise and attack and men going their own way and women, stomping on the hearts of men with their, stiletto heels. And there's no place to turn. There's no place of a beautiful message, because the ones who want a beautiful message are silent out of prudence, really.
Well, first of all, my guess, and I think it's an educated one, is you're not spending a lot of time with the screechy voices.
No.
You're just letting those women kind of stew in their own juice and going after the more feminine women who actually, what's a concept like this worth, like men.
Exactly. Like I've been interviewed many times over the last 15 years, different radio shows and women's shows. And they ask me, what is your concept, or what do you think about what pornography is doing to us today, or feminism is doing us today? And I get it that there's pornography probably has a huge impact on our sense of intimacy, or feminism is causing whatever. But there's enough voices talking about that. And so I don't examine that. I don't talk about the social ills at all, because there's enough voices. They don't need to hear my opinion on it. So my whole idea and my whole work is to take an end run around all that conversation. What is a life of significance? What is a life of beauty? What does it mean to create peak experiences for others and to seek them for ourselves, essentially?
So what I gather from what you're saying is something that I would agree with, the sentiment that I would agree with, which is women bring beauty to the world. That's part of the feminine nature. And we as men would have to be crazy not to explore that. Yeah,
we can't have the strength and conviction and the warrior spirit without the counterbalancing feminine grace that sustains us. It's a life-giving energy. We're thrusters. We move into the world and we create and we fight and we climb and we do all these things. And we need to be able to crawl back into our tent, our cave, and put our head in the lap of the feminine spirit, that tells us it's going to be okay. And it's what we're starving for, because women are not in general like that, and men are not in general like what I described either. So it's this tepid, intermixed, washed out masculine type of energy and a washed out type of feminine energy, and there's no real spirit in any of it. And so we're all, everyone's discouraged.
Well, how do we get back to our roots, Dan? What are you telling these guys about that? Because I know that's absolutely an integral part of your life's work.
Yeah. Well, I spent all my life work doing that. I mean, you take a guy, and if a guy's angry because he was hurt or abandoned, I get that, and that's something you can work with. It's not misogynistic. It's just really, afraid to be hurt again. And so you put on a shield, and that's a good guy. If we're sincere and our heart's sincere, then there's a path forward, and it's a thick jungle, and very few people have gone through the path. And the way I look at myself is I'm just someone who's gone through this jungle in some measure, and I can point and say, look, there's a better way. Take a look, go through this way. And I do have a lot of hope, because I'm not discouraged in any way or thinking, I'm not dismal. I don't think it's pessimistic. I think that there's a lot of reclamation of beauty, of polarity, of feminine grace and masculine edge. I think that we just have to sit in the company of the right people who we gather with, and look forward. And so my whole message, my whole work all these years has been saying, wait a minute, we don't have to fight against the insignificant or the significant voices out there. We can take an end run around it and talk about what is the measure of a man, and what is the essence of the feminine grace. And there's volumes of people who respond to that want a good message.
We've talked at length on this show about how easy it is to find your tribe of complainers online, be that through a Facebook group or on Twitter. And yet the people who aren't complaining are the people who are satisfied, the people who are content. And for as many people as you see complaining about men, if they're women, or vice versa, with the MGTOW guys, like you mentioned, for example, there's a multitude of women who are happy with their relationships with the men or where they're going. I mean, a breakup happens here and there, or a guy lies to them, but they don't end up eternally butthurt over it. They move on to the next one and do that with some measure of optimism. And since they're sweet, kind women, they generally attract decent guys. And there's lots of guys out there who love women, and they don't need dating advice because they're doing fine because the women love them in return. You hear all about the marriages that break up and people who are miserable and people who are mean to each other, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's still true that a lot of us are happy. A lot of us do know what it means to be in a relationship with a woman if we're a guy, and vice versa for a woman, and truly connect and truly appreciate each other. And those people aren't making a lot of noise because they have better things to talk about. They're not angry. They're not all caught in this vortex of shame and pain or whatever else would be in that cocktail of misery. Right. And therefore, it doesn't really come up much in conversation. It's certainly not something they're militant about. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the whole point is, guys say, well, everywhere I turn, I run into these angry women or, manipulative women or whatever it is. And women are saying the same thing. I'm running into these guys, and so the hope starts to dwindle and starts to fade away for them, because that's what they see. But the whole point, and what I tell the men, is we have to stop waiting for women to be nice to us, and stop waiting for the world to stack around us the way we want it to be, and sit in, looking at our navel and sitting in our victimhood, because it's incumbent upon us as leaders, men are leaders, to create the space we want, to start to seek beauty by choice, because it's not out there. I mean, it's there, but it's hidden. It's buried by society and layers of suspicion and layers of, all the things we talked about. And so to start to seek it and say, no, I turn my way from anything that doesn't have beauty in it, and move towards beauty and seek it out and call it forth. And to describe it to women, I'm on a different journey than most men. I'm seeking beauty. What's your name? And because when you do that, when you have that as the proactive way of looking at the world and say, I'm going to find this, I'm going to head towards that, beauty arises. Beauty manifests itself around you because you're seeking it, and you become aware of it. You receive eyes, or you have eyes to receive it.
I'm on a different journey and I'm seeking beauty. What's your name?
Yeah. What a
now,
thing
that sounds
to say.
like a pickup line on the surface, but it's a whole lot more. And I think women know that instinctively. Man, I can picture a woman responding to that powerfully, because 99% of women in the world have never heard anything like that come out of a male human being's mouth.
That's correct.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
That's right.
How do women respond when you talk to them like that?
Well, it stops them in their tracks, which you should do, and makes them, reassess, and in that flash of a moment, think about, what has value to them. Because if we're just, trying to get a girl in bed and live a life and try and get some more money so we can buy a fancy car and stuff like that, and women are doing the same thing, and they're, then there's no depth, there's no formative energy that can be happening. So I can compliment a woman, or a man like this can compliment a woman, or say something like, he can say, you know what, you're a true beauty. And it lands in a different way than an average guy trying to make a compliment to looking for something in return. Because it's the difference between, like a king standing on the earth and saying, I'm going to say this to you because it's who I am. You look like a true beauty to me, and I don't know you, and I'd like to know you. That all of those sentences land with conviction, and that's what's missing. So that with that sense of conviction, all the things that sound like pickup artists saying aren't at all.
Well, also on top of that, what woman in her right mind is going to reject a conversation like that? Because you're going into such a conversation with an absolute clear and present lack of outcome dependency. You're saying, I'm on a journey seeking beauty, and I think you can contribute to that. What's she going to do? Say, go away because you're a little twit? You're not demanding anything from her. It's not a competition. It's just a conversation, like I always say. And in the truest sense of the word, you're offering her the opportunity to participate in a conversation women inherently love to have. It feels like home to them, right? Yeah.
I mean, like, the difference is this, and very simplistic, but I'll say it. If you say to a girl, you have beautiful eyes, and that's something that a guy would say, and maybe it takes up his courage to say that. And it's not a bad thing to say, but she's heard it her whole life. And so a difference would be to say, you know what, I'm going to say this to you. You have beautiful eyes. And I know you've heard that your whole life, but you've never heard it from me before. And there's something in that kind of construct, the energy around that, not necessarily those words, but that energy of, yes, you've heard this before. I acknowledge that. I get it, but you've never heard that from me. Which is a leader on this earth saying something that has conviction in it, which has calmness in it, which has smiling energy in it, which has empathy in it, which is respected it, that she's never heard before.
Well, there's an understanding of women there, the need for safety and security. You talked about being a leader. And, you alluded to this, but it's worth saying a different way. Guys truly do either see that responsibility of leadership as a gift or a curse, depending on how much courage they possess to go out and act on it. Oh, God, you mean I have to ask all these women out? Why can't they approach me first? Why can't these women do something different for a change and ask me out? Well, it's never going to happen because women aren't attracted to that idea. You got this crazy app out there called Bumble where they say, okay, you know what? Once there's a match made, you both have swiped right on each other, then women make the first move. Yeah, the first move 95% of the time is hi, or what are you looking for? It's an invitation for the guy to actually make a real first move that will turn her on. So, I've said it before on the show. It's kind of like playing Jeopardy. It's a gimmick.
Yeah.
In Jeopardy, you're really answering Q&A, but you have to form it as if it's the question that what you just read off the board answers the question to. It's a gimmick. Women really still want you to make the first move, and you're still expected to. Now, if you're a man who sees the privilege of leading, I get to call the shots. I get to decide which woman I'm going to choose first. They may take it or leave it. They may choose me. They may not. But if I'm not going to get offended by a woman having the right to her opinion, then I'm not going to be hurt by that. And again, it won't be a competition. I can keep talking to women, trying to extract the beauty, coax out that beauty, bring out the playfulness is one way I like to put it. When women are happy and they're bringing something beautiful to the world, they tend to be playful. And that playfulness ultimately turns into horniness, and men and women are happy together. But a lot of guys shy away from that privilege of leading, thinking it's troublesome and wishing that they could just be reactive instead of proactive, that they could be passive instead of, I'm going to use the word penetrative, because it's a metaphor for the sex act. So going all the way back full circle to you talking to a woman about her beautiful eyes, instead of just flinging a comment at her like a frisbee, for God's sake, you're penetrating her with meaning.
Exactly.
I'm the one talking to you this time.
That's right.
This is different.
Well said.
And that elicits that response of stopping her in her tracks like a deer in the headlights. And the funny thing is, we as men fear being caught that way. We don't like being penetrated by dudes. We feel alphaed when a guy's kind of mansplaining us, And it's funny because, the whole term mansplaining is caught up by the feminist movement, who are trying to claim masculinity for themselves, even as they're trying to get men to stop being masculine and be a little bit more passive. The whole future is female thing.
Right.
But for women, it's different, isn't it? I mean, they have a different response to being caught dead in their tracks and being penetrated by a real man. Can you describe how women feel when that happens for these guys?
Well, yeah, it short circuits something. And it's so rare to have a man stand on the earth. He might be nervous, but he's got conviction. And the conviction is, I like that girl, and I'm going to take 3 steps over there and I'm going to say that to her. There's something about you and I like you and I don't know why. And I would like to see you again. Everything he just said has a period at the end. There's no inquisitive frame there. It's just saying, there's something about you that I like. I would like to see you again. All those sentences land. The ball is always in her course. She can pick up the ball and walk off. She can leave it on the ground. She can hit it back. But he's just speaking how he wants his worldview to be arranged around him, because that's all we know for sure. So he can't get rejected. If he says, I would like to see you again, no woman can say, well, no, you don't. You can't get rejected. You're only speaking your truth. I'm just saying what I would like to have happen. She might want something different. And when you have that, when you say these statements with conviction of what you know to be true, I know to be true that I saw you. I was standing with my friend Scott over there. I saw you and I had to come say hi. Those are all statements of conviction, and they can't be negated. There's nothing she can do to say, no, I reject that. So those are truths. And then if you can sit in the tension of that, which is fantastic, without trying to blather it and drain it all away by fast talking and being interesting and blah, 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 and just say a statement like, I would like to see you again, and shut up. If he can say that with a smile on his face and shut up, and giving her the space to have to break into the tension and say, okay, well, I get off at 8 o'clock, or I'm free on Thursdays, or here, take my number, here's my Instagram. If he can do that and sit in the tension of that, and she has to proffer her contact information, or maybe not, but if she gives you her Facebook or her Instagram, when you send her a message there after, she's not going to quote unquote flake, because you said what you would like to have happen in the world. I'd like to see you again. And you can be silent to that. And now she can respond or not. It's got beauty to it.
On the surface, that sounds a lot like semantics. Okay, you're just phrasing your desire to see her a different way, et cetera, et cetera. But there are 2 very powerful psychological elements to this style of communicating with women that you're talking about. The first one is what you've already pointed out, that your words are being thrown on the table with a period at the end. The thoughts are there. They can't be disputed. That's along the same lines of what I recommend, which is suggesting to women rather than asking women.
That's correct.
No begging, no pleading, nothing left to chance or mercy. It's simply, here's what I think should happen.
Correct.
And she can take it or leave it. But not only does that suggestion take the competition and the opportunity for rejection off the table, it portrays this confidence where you believe her answer to you should be yes. There is no question. There's only a simple statement. I'm reminded of how I asked my wife, Emily, to be my girlfriend, which wasn't asking at all. I said, I don't think I need any more women in my life except you. So
statement.
You and I should hang out together from now on. Just you.
Statement. Perfect.
And I told her after that, I will take care of your heart and I will protect you. And she knows word for word what I told her, and she bragged to her friends about it.
That's 3 statements with conviction of what you know to be true in your heart. And it lands. And that's what's so different is, modern man has their sentences go up at the end and they're like, would you like to maybe hang out sometime?
Right. A guy will say, I'm sorry to bother you, but would you mind if you gave me your phone number? Would that be okay? They're begging, they're pleading, they're expecting the outcome to be negative. Therefore, they have led in that direction. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, for heaven's sakes.
They're supplicants. Exactly. As opposed to just saying, listen, I know what I like. You look like something that I would like to have in my life. And I want to say that. Boom. And there's such a difference. And what you asked earlier, what short circuits in the woman's mind, whether she recognizes it or not, her whole body and her whole demeanor, her whole physiognomy and her emotions and everything recognize that she's in the presence of a leader who's speaking his truth to the world. It's as simple as that. And
you know what the beauty of it is? Instead of you begging for something from her, you're offering something to her she already wants, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
My wife, Emily, wanted to be my girlfriend. She wanted me as much as I wanted her. So instead of begging from her what I wanted from her, I offered to her something she already wanted. Now, what is the more appealing prospect there? Obviously, it's the latter. And even as you were speaking, I'm going back in time and recalling that moment, Zan. And in retrospect, there was no other way to present my feelings to my wife at that time other than in pure, direct statements rather than asking or begging or wondering. Because I knew what I wanted.
Right.
I knew I wanted her. The conviction wasn't something I was faking to look macho or to pretend I was a leader. I was stating something I had clearly decided in my mind, and she could sense the power and the truth behind it. I was speaking my truth, just like you said. And see, given an example like that, I think guys will begin to see, hey, you know what? This isn't only powerful. This not only stops women in their tracks, but it's pretty damn fun. It makes you feel like a man. It makes her feel like a woman, and it's just horny.
Yeah.
And see, one thing I would add to this whole idea of how it stops women in their tracks is that it's tied to that idea of her being offered something she actually wants. It's like, hey, I know you need money. Here's $1,000, no strings attached. You can just have the money. Here's 10 $100 bills. You're going to have that person's attention. It's like, okay, I'm listening. So if a man's begging or pleading, the indication there, what he's implying is that, he doesn't expect her to want it. How do I trick this woman into bed?
Right.
How do I run some little routine that bypasses her rejection mechanism? Or, one of these cheesy things you've seen in a pickup artist video ad. That's for losers, dude. That's for guys who have no confidence at all, who are starting from ground zero, never have had any experience with a real woman, to tell them what their itching ears want to hear about how they can trick women instead of doing the heavy lifting to be the man who has an authentic, real, gratifying experience with a real woman, for gosh sakes. Do you have anything to riff on there, or do you want me to ask a question?
No, that's good. I think it's well said. And, like when you say you speak your truth, you speak statements that you know to be true about your heart and what you want, it's unassailable. She cannot diminish it or attack it or reject it or say that it isn't true, because it is true.
Yeah, it all goes back to the very commonly held idea nowadays that nobody can argue with how you feel. It's how you feel. What are they going to say? No, you don't feel like that. It's a common principle in, psychotherapy even. So not that we're therapizing these women and we're not trying to psychoanalyze them or anything, but it just flat out works in the male-female realm to state what you believe with the full confidence that together you're going to connect. And as we've talked about in this show before, the whole idea of connection just seems to be bypassed in the world of social media and now dating apps. So it's very refreshing to have you talk about that and talk about it in terms that guys can easily understand. This is absolutely such a necessary conversation. And you know, Zan, that kind of leads me to another question, which is, what would you tell guys who have led themselves to believe somehow that women really are only good for sex? You know, the whole point is to get laid. I don't ever want to get married. I don't ever want to have a relationship with a woman. I don't even need to know her more than one night at a time. Just, you know, put the round peg in the round hole, you know, get your wick dipped and move on. Some guys are actually quite satisfied with that mindset. What are they missing out on? I mean, should they even strive to understand the deeper meaning of what a woman can provide us? I mean, you know, some guys, like I said, they don't want that. Other guys are thinking, yeah, I wish there was more than that. What do you tell these guys either way?
Well, I think, you know, men go through various stages in their life. A lot of guys, as you know, they come out of a 10 or 12-year marriage and they're convicted that I'm just going to play the field. I don't want to ever do that again. And I'm just going to, you know, like you said, just like hop around. And we go through these phases, different trials and tribulations and enlightenments of our life. So I guess there's nothing wrong with any of that. But at some point, for sure, our heart turns toward companionship and fulfillment and appreciation that we want from someone else, and to look at the face of the beloved. You know, like our heart is desiring, maybe not now in this moment, I just want to get laid, tired of women, whatever, and I'm just having fun and I'm satisfied and I'm good by myself and I'm, you know, I like my private space and stuff. But at some point in our lives, we're drawn towards the idea of the beloved that's mirroring us, that is opposite us, that affection, that we feel affection, we feel devotion from that. And it's something that if they're not feeling it now, my suggestion is that they will feel it at some point in their life and as time goes on. So, and especially guys, you know, they're working in businesses and entrepreneurs and they're fighting for that. And their whole concentration on that is on that. At some point, they look around and say, okay, now wait a minute. What else is fulfilling for my life? And why am I alone or why am I lonely? And, you know, the biggest fear, I think, is to be lonely when we're old. And so I think no matter what the phase, enjoy it now, because at some point you're going to want to be looking into the face of the beloved.
So that brings me to a very interesting conversation twist here. For years and years, you were a single man, traveling the world, enjoying the company of women. And finally, you found a woman you connected with, who you've been with for 7 years, and just recently got married.
That's right.
I think a lot of guys would be very surprised you ever got married, because you seemed like the guy who was going to live the Playboy lifestyle forever. Not in the negative sense, but certainly as a guy who could get just about any woman he wants, wherever he wants in the entire world. And it seems like one hell of an adventure. So how did you know that you had met the right woman and that she was your beloved?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we've been together 7 years. And I was, for years before that, as you know, I was traveling the world and living different places. And I had girls and I had women in my life. But there was no woman on earth that I thought about when she wasn't around. In other words, no woman I was pining for. And so I wasn't seeking companion and I wasn't not seeking companion. And when I met my beauty, she just kind of accidentally was walking beside me one day, metaphorically. And we've been together in lockstep ever since. And 7 years later, we're more connected than we ever have been. And she's Romanian and I'm Canadian. And so there's a practicality to the marriage side of things too, for like moving through the world, as you know. And how did I know it? Like anything that is beautiful, a painting or a sunset, you turn toward it and beauty has a quality of dawning on you. It's something you don't realize in an instant. And it has to dawn on you. And this entire relationship with this girl, it dawned on me in an unfolding type of way, which is remarkable to me. And I could wax eloquent forever on it.
Well, that alone tells you she's the right woman if you could wax eloquent forever.
I totally could, yeah.
She's your favorite subject.
Absolutely. Yeah. My partner in crime, you bet.
Yeah. Well, you know, kind of as a segue from there, I would imagine that you would stand by the point that a man doesn't necessarily have to have one steady girlfriend or get married.
Of course.
Enter into a long-term relationship in order to live a lifestyle where he actually appreciates women and isn't in it just to get laid. And certainly lots of women have a very shallow view. You know, are you some kind of playboy and you're just playing the field and like to get laid and are some sort of commitment phobe, or are you going to put a ring on my finger and marry me? And that's a very transactional way to look at it. Whereas you and I both tend to look at our relationships with our respective women, who are the women of our dreams, our beloved, as you call them, which I think is a wonderful term, as someone who isn't reduced to a set of transactions in life. It's someone I like coming home to. It's someone I love spending time with. It's someone who's one of me. We're on the same team. We contribute to each other's happiness. Not that we have to make each other happy, but we're just so glad the other person was born and that we had this wonderful privilege of spending time with them and falling in love with them.
Right.
And that so transcends all the pseudo values that people seem to surround relationships with nowadays. You know, what can this person do for me? How do I get this person to do my bidding? Everything you see in the cheap second-rate dating advice out there. So what a refreshing conversation in general, Zan. I want to point these guys to your book called The Alabaster Girl, which you've had on Amazon for quite a while now, but it's one hell of a read because it slaps you in the face as a guy and makes you think differently. And that goes for however you're feeling about women right now. No matter what station you're in, what place you feel like you're in right now in terms of your relationship with women in general, I think that book is going to be just fantastic. Tell these guys a little bit more briefly about what they can expect when they crack open The Alabaster Girl after they grab it off of Amazon and start digging into it.
Sure. This book took me 10 years to write as I was traveling. I wrote it birthday to birthday, 10 years, from 40 years old to 50 years old, published it on my 50th birthday. And I started to write a book to my young self, what I'd learned about the heart of women and the rhythm of relationship. And it just fell flat and it felt too self-helpy for me or something. I don't know what. But anyway, I was writing it to myself, then I was writing it to men, and it morphed into this book that's written to women. It's a book about women, written to women, which is, quite presumptuous on my part. But it's written in a voice of a man who has seen some things in this world, who has experience with women, who understands the hearts and minds of women and been in the company and the arms of women his entire life. And now he's going to describe to women why they respond to him in ways they don't respond to other men. And that's what I tried to capture in this book. The essence of seeing beauty, the essence of living a life of adventure, of conviction, of boundaries, the whole thing's there. And it's a conversation between a fictitious man and the women of the world and the women he's loved, and an impressionist painting of all his memories of the women who've been in his life. And if men read it, the hope is that they can listen in on that conversation he's having and apply it to their lives. So my labor of love, this book.
Excellent. In a twisted sort of way, it kind of feels like the same concept behind C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters. You're kind of a fly on the wall listening to this conversation between a senior demon and a lower end demon about how they plot against humanity. And then you glean from it kind of by proxy all these lessons that were kind of indirectly spoken to you. So,
That's cool.
Not that women are demons. Perhaps it's a faulty analogy, but it's what I thought of. A guy talking to women in a book for men. Right? Yeah. So that just helps men really gain a mindset focus rather than, okay, here are a bunch of how-to instructions for your life. It's a much deeper read than simply reading your garden variety nonfiction book. So, guys, you can go to www.mountaintoppodcast.com/Zan, Z-A-N. I forgot to mention you're actually a return visitor to this show, but your first episode we recorded together has long since been retired because of
a decade ago
sound quality way back when not being quite there. So we can go ahead and give you that URL with your first name. So guys, go to www.mountaintoppodcast.com/Zan, Z-A-N, and get yourself a copy of The Alabaster Girl. Zan, I wouldn't have expected anything less from one of the premier minds in understanding women in this world and attracting them. But what a wonderful, fascinating conversation that I'm sure guys are going to glean just immense worth from. So thank you so much for stopping by.
Well, thanks for having me again, Scott. It's been fantastic.
Oh, yeah, man.
Good conversation.
Yeah, agreed. And one that, like I said, guys need to have. Guys need to hear these things. And gentlemen, if you haven't yet visited www.mountaintoppodcast.com, the first thing that I'm going to mention to you is we are now publishing transcripts of all of these podcasts. You guys have been asking for it for years. Some of you like to read along as you listen, like you do in all of my programs. Those transcripts are free, and you can click on the link that is boldly emblazoned with the word transcript under any of the episodes that you click on when you go to www.mountaintoppodcast.com and download a transcript on the fly. So while we're giving that a try, it's in beta right now. We have transcripts for episodes from 150 onward. That's the Dr. Robert Glover episode. So definitely enjoy that. Also, I do have an Amazon influencer page, and I have placed The Alabaster Girl by none other than Zan Perrion himself at the top of that queue for you. So when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon and see that page, you'll see Zan's book right there next to mine at the top. Also, when you go to mountaintoppodcast.com, you can reserve a time to talk to me for free for 25 minutes about whatever's on your mind, and maybe possibly talk about a coaching program if that's what you're finally ready to do. And of course, get in on my newsletter where I send you actionable advice on how to be a better man and get better women into your life starting today. And all of that is free for you at www.mountaintoppodcast.com. Until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.